Hi guys, we're back with another video. This time we're going to look at something we've done in the past, which is some winter small stillwater fishing. Now I know for a lot of you guys that like to fish rivers, your season's finished unless you're out chasing the grayling in cold, crystal clear waters. Well, now it's time to hit the still waters. Now I'm a massive fan of winter fishing. It's one of my favourite times of year here. Despite the fact it's the 2nd of November today, it's balmy sunshine, there are buzzers hatching everywhere. But the great thing is the water here at Haywards Farm at the Game Fishing Centre, the water's in its best condition. The fish in the lake now, they've had a pretty tough warmish season through the summer where we had to shut and we were up into the 20+ degrees water temperatures. So those fish kind of shut down. Now, dare I say it, the water is crystal clear, all the weeds died back and those fish are starving hungry. So this is a great time of year to get out and about and chase some of these fish. Now, you can probably see some fish rising behind me here on Haywards Lake, which is great to see in this condition. So despite the fact it's so late in the year, there are buzzers hatching and these fish will make the most of that hatch and get straight on those flies. But I'm going to take a look at a few of the things I've got in my box, just to give you some advice and some help and hopefully get you a few more fish on the bank this winter. Now, when I was younger, I used to carry around so many fly lines with me back in my competition match fishing days. I probably carried around something like 20, 22 different fly lines. Now I'm out of the scene, I like to make life a little bit easier for me, and a couple of seasons ago I replaced pretty much every single fly line I had, and some of those lines were maybe 12, 14 years old. So I carry a whole array around with me, and I've got a couple of different bodies. And this, you know, I'm a big fan of cassette reels, particularly for stillwater stuff. So I've got a couple of different bodies there. And then along with that, because when you're having lots of different fly lines, it can get quite expensive having to buy a separate spool every time, I've got a nice little loaded pouch here with all my different fly lines, which each one of them's got identifications on the back, so I know exactly which one's which. So it just allows me to fish everything from right on the surface with my floating line, down through midge tips, long midge tips, neutral densities which just ever so slightly slowly sink, intermediates, then I've got type 3s, type 5s, type 6, type 7, so I can cover everything right from the surface down to the very lowest depths of the water. And it just makes life really easy when everything's nice and organised like this. I say 2 bodies, so I can have a couple of different rods set up as well. And the important thing is to maintain your lines, look after them. It's something we get asked an awful lot, you know, how long does a fly line last? And if ever there was a saying, you know, a truer use of the phrase, how long's a piece of string, this is exactly it. If you don't look after your fly lines and you just chuck them in your bag after you've been fishing, they're not going to last you as long. If you take just a little bit of time and effort to give them a clean after a day's fishing, they're going to last substantially longer than if you just chuck them away at the end of the day. It's a really, really simple process. All you have to do is when you get home, I just jump in the sitting room, wind all my fly line off onto the floor, get a nice cleaning cloth with a bit of cleaning solution, fold it in half and just wind it back onto my fly line, and you'd be amazed at how much grime and grit you pick up after a day's fishing. And just taking that off there makes the fly line slicker, makes them cast further, and most importantly, is going to make them last an awful lot longer. So fly lines aren't a cheap thing anymore, so the longer you can make them last, the better value for money you're going to get and the better it's going to be on your wallet. So looking at a few of my fly lines, just keep it nice and organised, and those are some of my essentials that I keep there. Along with that, your fly box. Well, I used to be terrible for having far too many flies. Back in my competition days, I'd have thousands and thousands and thousands of patterns, and I completely changed my thinking and my ethos behind how I select my flies. So rather than having hundreds of patterns, what I do is I would have a dozen or so of the same pattern, but have a lot less patterns. So as you can see from in here, some of these flies in here, this is the pretty gaudy side, you know, your Christmas decorations, but you know, the likes of your blobs in various colours, various different boobies, particularly this time of year, the sparkler boobies are very good. There's a lot of fry in the lake here and the water temperature is getting quite cold and these fish are hungry, and as soon as they switch onto those fry, the sparkler boobies and those attractor flies, they're going to come into their own. The other side, the more natural side, which is, to be honest, is far more my favourite side, These are my nymphs and my buzzers and my dry flies. Now you can see that there's flies hatching everywhere and fish rising all over the shop. So shuttlecock buzzers, even in November, December, it's only going to take a small change in temperature during the day to really get a hatch going. You know, it's mid-morning here. It's really quite warm. You can see I'm in short sleeves and the sun's nice and hot and buzzers are popping everywhere. So I would have no hesitations about jumping onto a dry fly even in the middle of winter. Underneath the water, obviously your buzzers, they might not be hatching all year round unless the conditions are right, but those flies are in the water all year round. Same with your damsels. You know, they only hatch off in sort of June, July, August when the water's really warm and you'll see the blue damsels flashing all the way around the lake. But those insects in their nymph stage are in the water all year round and they make up a big part of the diet of a trout. So having a nice selection of flies, and as you can see, it's not hundreds of different patterns, but I've got several of the same pattern. So these are all my go-to patterns that I've got confidence in, that I enjoy fishing with. And I think for a lot of people, the most important thing is having confidence in your flies. You know, if you have confidence in a pattern, you fish it better. You're always on the edge like a coiled spring, ready to go for that fish to take, because every time you cast that fly out, you're expecting to get a fish. And that confidence is a massive thing when it comes to catching fish. Along with those flies, I've got a few other boxes, as you do this time of year in particular. You know, it's fry feeding time, so I've got some really big, gaudy fry imitations, whether they're booby type, popper types. I've got some humongous and a few other fry patterns and zonkers. And once these fish start hitting these fry, this is a box that I go to quite quickly. And it's, you know, you can pull up some really big fish once they get onto these naturals. A few other bits and pieces that I carry in my box. Obviously, I've got my glasses on my head. I've always got those in there. Leader material. I'm a big fan of pure fluorocarbons when I'm fishing anything subsurface. Seagars, the Fluoroflex Plus by Rio, some of my favourites. This one's at 9.5 pounds. For a water like this, I wouldn't want to go less than 9.5 pounds, to be honest. It's about the same diameter as about a 5.5 pound nylon. Its refractive index is almost the same as water, so the fish aren't going to see it anyway. So if I can get away with a much higher breaking strain, why not? And equally, today I'm going to be fishing with a couple of flies, so two flies on probably around about a 14 to 16 foot leader. If I happen to catch a couple of fish at the same time, at least with 9.5 pounds, if I've got one 3 pound fish going that way and another 3 pound fish going that way, I stand a much better chance of catching both of them if I've got a heavier breaking strain. So just a few of the things I carry around with me. We're going to get ourselves set up, go and try a few different techniques, and hopefully get a few fish on the bank to show you how these techniques actually work. So let's go get tackled up. So the wind has just picked up a little bit, so I've just got started on one of my favourite setups here. I've got Rio Midge Tip Long, which is a full floating body, and then the last 6 feet is just an intermediate, so it'll sink about 1.5 to 2 inches a second, which with this bit of ripple that's just coming up now, it just gives me a little bit more control of the depths of my fly. You know, if I was fishing just a straight floater, then I wouldn't be able to keep those flies down just a little bit more and still be in direct contact. So very versatile fly line. I've set up with that Reverse Grand Max, a 9.5 pound leader. And I've got roughly about a 14 foot leader with one dropper and a point fly, so I'm fishing 2 flies. I've set up with a dull back, which is a classic nymph, general suggestive kind of pattern, and just a really simple white marabou tailed flashback hares here, which has been one of my favourite patterns for a very long time. Particularly in clear water like this, the white just stands out like a sore thumb. So, you know, if they get within sort of 4 or 5 feet of this, they should hopefully see it. And we're still, despite the bit of ripple, we're still seeing fish on top, which is great to see. But the nice thing about this fishery, regardless of what time of the year it is, the fish are always looking up for some reason. They always like to come up to the surface. It's a hotbed of buzzer here, which makes up the vast majority of a stillwater trout's diet. So There's a lot of bloodworm in here and a lot of pupa. And you say with this change in temperature today, despite it being November, there's buzzers hatching everywhere, and these fish are making the most of it. So I'm hoping one of these fish that's up near the surface taking adults will quite happily take one of my offerings just below the surface. So we shall see. Casting just slightly into the wind at the moment, which is never a bad thing, because anything that's on the surface is going to get pushed in towards me, but it does make your casting a little bit trickier than if it was on your back. But if it was always easy, it wouldn't be so much fun, would it? Well, we started off in absolutely glorious sunshine, balmy weather for the start of November, in short sleeves and just a little gilet. But then we've had a whole raft of cloud cover coming in, and the temperatures dropped quite significantly. And along with that, it's just killed the buzzer hatch. But we just had a break a minute ago with the wind, and it went flat calm again, and literally within about 30 seconds, buzzers started coming off again, and there were fish rising left, right and centre. 5 minutes later, winds just come up again, clouds come in, get that chill again. So as you can see, I'm now in a long sleeve jacket just to keep myself warm, but I'm going to persevere with these nymphs for a little bit longer. We have one very little tentative tap, which could possibly have been a perch just a few minutes ago, but we're going to give this a little bit longer. But I'm still scanning the water, I'm still searching for fish moving in other positions, so I've got no hesitations about upping sticks and moving to somewhere else if I see fish moving. And it's one of the biggest downfalls for a lot of small stillwater anglers is they get to a position and they just sit there all day and they wonder why they haven't caught anything. And the important thing is to keep on the move, keep mobile. That's the beauty of fly fishing. You're carrying very little with you. It's not a 2-day event to set up. You just carry a few bits with you and move. So I'll give this probably another 10 minutes here, and if I've not had any more interest, then I shall go for a wander. There we go. There we go. Well, it took a little bit of doing, but finally we've had a proper solid pull. Doesn't know it's hooked yet, which is always nice, but it's taken the little hairs here with the white tail. So one of my favourite patterns. I'm just going to walk myself back in a little bit, take some of this line out of the way. Ever such a tentative little take though, just nipping at it. Just going to grab my net. Still doesn't really know that he's hooked that much, but that's the beauty of this clear water as well. These fish fight so hard. And up you come. Oh, in she goes. Well, we've persevered with the nymphs, and we've got our just dessert, so quite happy with that. There you have it. Absolute beauty. Thick, fit, strong, pretty coloured fish, just with the sun glinting off its side. Ready for a release?
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll carry on with those nymphs for a little bit longer. Just let her get her head back, and away she goes. So, we just decided we'd have ourselves a little bit of a move. We'll come up to the bottom end of the lake here, where it is flat, calm, and much warmer out the wind. And I've got fish rising all around me, so just gonna persevere with these nymphs for a little bit, and if they carry on regularly rising, I'm very tempted to go on to dry fly. They're just sipping right close to the surface. I can tell by the way they're rising that they're very shallow in the water because they're very slight head and tails, so their vision window is tiny. The closer to the surface they are, the smaller that window of vision is. So I've got a fairly simple setup here for the dry fly. I've got about 15-foot overall leader. I've got 2 flies set about 7-8 foot apart. I've just got a little foam shipman's on the point, and on my dropper just a little CDC buzzer emerger. And I just want them, they're just ever so slightly drifting around, but I'm just giving them a tiny little twitch every now and again, enough just to move the surface, but not enough to sink them. Ooh, that was a first fish. Just came up and nosed it then. Interesting. So that's only our first cast with the dries, and straight away we're getting interest. So there was something there he didn't quite like. But that's a good start. Always encouraging. Who'd have thought it, fishing dry in the start of November. So there's a little bit of ripple here. And the little CDC shuttlecock I've been using isn't quite clear enough for me to see. So I'm just going to go onto a little popper hopper, which is a great dry fly, but having this buoyant head on it means it's really difficult to sink it. So I can give it a good twitch and attract a bit of attention without the fly getting sunk, which with my CDC there, it was just disappearing a little bit too often. Oh, you... Okay. Well, that was not so successful insofar as we didn't land any fish, but we had several fish come up to attempt the dry fly. But we're just going to have a last change of tack. We're going to have a go with an intermediate line and a couple of mini lures, just to see if we can get these fish being a little bit more aggressive and chasing. So just a quick change over, and we'll see what we can do. Right, just another move, try a bit of fresh water. It's been a tough all day, but you know, we've had fish to the longline nymphs and we've raised a few fish on the dries, which has been lovely. But they've just, with these changeable conditions we've been having over the last few weeks, they just don't really seem to be locked on. But we've still managed some fish, and it's been an enjoyable day. Just trying to see if we can wake some up with a few lures stripped back. But it's just shown us, you know, 3 very different approaches to fishing on the same day. You know, we've had the longline nymphs, the naturals, you know, fishing dry fly on the surface where most people would completely ignore it, but actually, you know, it brought quite a few fish up to the surface to have a look at our offerings. And then now on the lures just to finish off. So it's been a very enjoyable day. It's been quite frustrating at times, but the fish haven't necessarily wanted to play ball like we would probably want them to. But as they say, that's why it's called fishing and not catching. Finally, something that might stick. Well, it took a bit of doing. And it has come to the big fly. So after all that time, we were trying with small competition-sized flies. Just stepped it up to something, I suppose, big and ugly, a bit more like the fry that we've got in the water this year. And lo and behold, it's worked. Strong fish in this clear water. It just looks beautiful with this light. There we go. Well, it's been a bit of a struggle. It's been tough going. We've caught fish on the longline nymph. We've had rises to the dry fly with the hopper popper and the little shipmans. and then we've played around with the lures a little bit on an intermediate line, from small competition flies up to big streamers, which that was just on a zonker cat's whisker. So we've managed to cover a few bases today on what's been a beautiful, if not variable, very changeable weather conditions, but ultimately we've persevered, we've tried different things, and there's the result. So nice big plump rainbow, and away it goes. Thanks ever so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, picked up a few hints and tips, and we'll see you again next time on the bank.